So guys, I want to talk about the rumor that we've had from a very reputable Twitter source that Panasonic are not going to release the GH6 as their next camera. It's going to be a GH5 Mark II. At first, the leak was just a few details in a tweet, but since then we have seen the entire spec sheet leaked for the GH5 Mark II. And I have been through it and I really can't find much that is different. In fact, the only thing that I can find that is different is that it will have USB charging. Now, the only time they use Mark II is when they're about to kill off a line. The only time we've seen Panasonic use Mark II on something is when that is the last one that they're going to produce. So this is really bad news. This is kind of looking like we're not going to see a GH6 and they're going to kill off the GH line, which makes absolutely no sense to me as a Micro Four Thirds user. But as a Panasonic businessman, it probably kind of does make sense. They've got the S line to think about. They can't make a GH6 that's going to probably have better video capabilities than its flagship S1H video-centric DS or mirrorless camera. They will cannibalize those sales if they do that. Everybody's expecting the GH6 to have 8K, and to be fair, it's possible that it could come with 12K. I mean, if they really wanted to push the envelope, that is not beyond the possibilities with a Micro Four Thirds size sensor. They do it with Blackmagic at the moment with Super 35, so even that comes in relatively affordable, so why couldn't they do it with a Micro Four Thirds sensor? My feeling is that they could, but then who's going to buy an S1H for £4,000 when the GH series usually comes in at around about £2,000 and you're going to have twice, 3 times the resolution? It doesn't really, well, twice the resolution. The S1H does shoot 6K video. So where does that leave Micro Four Thirds though? If they do not release the GH6, people will start to jump ship at an exponential rate. People are just going to leave Micro Four Thirds. They're going to pick up S1Hs or Canon R5s, the R3 and the R1 are on their way out soon as well, which are really going to be awesome cameras, and they're going to tempt a lot of people away from Micro Four Thirds, people that have the money to pay for that. See, that was always the beauty of Micro Four Thirds, is the size, the weight and the cost. I mean, everything was so cheap. The fact that you can adapt all kinds of lenses to Micro Four Thirds as well, it's just such a great system to get into. I mean, I understand a lot of these photography channels, I understand where they come from. You hear people like Tony Northrup say that Micro Four Thirds is dead, and Jared Poland will say that Micro Four Thirds is not for professionals. And I can see how guys like that would come to that conclusion, because they're surrounded by all of the latest state-of-the-art camera gear. From week to week, from day to day, they're sent brand new cameras, brand new lenses. They've used the best of the best, the most expensive glass all the time. Whereas your average user has saved up money to buy their one camera, their Micro Four Thirds camera. They might have invested in a lens as well, and they absolutely love that. They're forgetting how much, not just financial investment, but also emotional investment users have put into their gear. So they're just, Micro Four Thirds is this, Micro Four Thirds has a lot of disadvantages, but they can also be flipped on their head and used as advantages. You talk about a crop factor. Well, if you're shooting wildlife, crop factor comes in handy. It gets you twice as close with a lens that's about 1/3 or half the size as you would see in full frame. I mean, we all know about the advantages of Micro Four Thirds, and it does seem like a strange decision if they do kind of start to let go of the Micro Four Thirds system, considering that in Japan, it was the biggest selling system out of the lot this year or last year, 2020. Micro Four Thirds sold more than any other system in Japan. The Japanese know what they're talking about. But anyway, I'm interested to see what will happen if they do release a GH6, and what about the successor to the G9? We have had rumors about the GH6, how they're supposed to have 3 different versions of it, and it will be shooting 8K. I think 8K is kind of a given for the GH6. We all expect it to be shooting 8K. We'll just have to wait and see. We'll know by the end of this year. If we don't have an announcement or if we don't see any camera from Panasonic by the end of this year, then we can safely assume that we're not going to see a GH6, and that's going to be tough to deal with. Anyway, I'm David. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please consider subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.